one of the main highlights of the stress reduction course is to begin to see our patterns and how we react to stress. So this begins our discussion on the stress reactivity cycle. So we begin to learn, well, we've been beginning to learn how to deal with stress partly by creating it. You created stress by taking the time to take this class. That was stressful. So you had to learn how to work with that. Finding time to practice was also stressful. So inevitably there would be several types of stress occurring, right? Because that's just one aspect of your daily life, which includes many moments of different things that are happening all the time. You heard me say that there was a universe in a moment. There is a lot happening at any one time. The world is not static. Things change. Things come and go. Things are impermanent. And so part of our discussion will start to isolate our stressors. So we'll throw some graphics up along the way as I talk. But one is to identify several types of different stressors. So there are acute stressors and chronic stressors. So acute, so very brief, very temporary, and then chronic, ones that persist. So you can pick different types of stressors, and I'll ask you to reflect on your own. What are the stressors that you face in your life? When I first took this course, maybe 7 years ago, my stressors were very different. I had very tiny kids. Life was very stressful, but different types of stress, right? It's different now. Still have stressors, those never go away, but the type of stress is different. So acute stressors and chronic stressors, sometimes acute can turn into chronic, right? Like financially. So for people that are having financial stress, and most people do, right? Like maybe there's a bill due and your paycheck hasn't cleared yet. That's an acute type thing, right? Now, but if it's persisting month after month, or you're continuing to have some financial problems, then it's chronic. So that stressor is always occurring. So that's one type of stressor. And then you can run down the list of things that are going on in your life, right? So this is a very internal work. So when you search inside yourself and you reflect, what are the stressors that are occurring in my life right now? So you're given that time and that opportunity to spend reflecting on that. In the wheel of life, if you start to look at the different categories of your life, your family, your friends, your community, your support, your health, the health of others or others that you care for, that you love. Relationships. Some relationships might be good. Some others might have become something else. Maybe they're dysfunctional, and maybe there's some resentment there. Was certainly the case for me, right? So relationships can be very stressful. And relationships, even when they're good, can be hard work, right? There's also a type of stress with that. And that is always changing, right? Sometimes relationships can be really good, and then they ebb and flow. They're great, they're okay, and then you get back to see if you can get to that good place again. So acute stressors and chronic stressors. So just to guide you through a little bit about my own experience to kind of help jog some ideas for you, and you'll have time to write all these down. I used to drive a lot for my job. I was on the road almost 200 miles a day. Covered a large territory, several different school districts, and I was constantly going to different schools, different houses, and I spent a lot of time on the road. Well, it just so happens on the road that you have to deal with a lot of stress. So where I live, there are many cars on the road, there's many accidents. You see things that you would rather not see. You encounter traffic jams. These are all very stressful things. And that was just the commute. That wasn't even the job. The job was even more stressful. So you add that up, several hours in the car during the course of a day, a stressful job, and then a stressful family life, whether it was good or bad at the time. It was just a lot of stress. And for myself, the type of person, my personality, I was very giving of other people. So it was giving. And I neglected myself, my own self-care. I did not take care of my stress. So those acute things, those chronic things continued, right? And they impacted other people, not just myself. You can go down a laundry list of things. Owning a home repairs, unexpected accidents or plumbing issues, or all kinds of stuff. Things would just they happen, right? Like stress just happens. It's not like we choose a lot of these things. So there's acute and there's chronic. Now, in addition to that, there's internal and external stressors. Now, I mentioned traffic jams, so that would be an external stressor, right? There is something that is happening outside of myself that is impacting me. Internally is another thing. How am I internalizing my stress? When someone cuts me off or gives me a hand gesture, how do I handle that? Do I meet that with hostility and anger and maybe create a story about that person and how evil they are, or how ignorant or how dangerous they are to society? Maybe I should tell them that, yell at them, or not. So internally, we have our own stress, our own feelings, our own anxieties, our own frustrations. So if I choose to carry anger towards that person and hang on to that, no one can necessarily see that. They might feel it if they know me, but internally I am now carrying that emotion with me. Think about it another way. How many times have you been frustrated by something, or were stuck in traffic all day? You get to the office and you unload on somebody who has no idea what you've just been through. They don't know. Maybe they just said good morning, or asked you a question that you didn't feel like dealing with in that moment. So how you internalize stress, how you work with that becomes very important. How you view the world, how you view other people. If I view somebody as bad or not good, or I discount them, or I write them off, that's going to impact me. Right? Because if I don't trust them and I think everything that they do is not in to the interest of the greater good or not into my best interest, then it's going to stress me out. And so a lot of people do that. They judge other people, right? I've judged other people. I've made judgments that quite often were wrong about that person. Sometimes they're right. Sometimes we have to trust our intuition. But sometimes things are not as bad as we make them out to believe. Right? There was a study a few years ago that showed that of our anxieties, the thoughts that we have, our worries, more than 85% of that was not true. And beyond that, however catastrophes we thought of, they didn't happen. Or didn't happen like we thought. They weren't as bad as we thought they could be. And so if our mind is like Velcro for the negative, then we are constantly creating stress in our life. Constantly. And now that stress, and I'll show a diagram, when we come into a stressful situation or a stressor occurs to us, there is a basic reaction that we have developed over time, right? Fight, flight, or freeze. Fight, flight, or freeze. Now, with that being said, those are your basic reactions. Fight doesn't always mean that you're going to be physical, although you can see when people get stressed out, that's your default mode. That fight, flight, or freeze. Now in this program, you're put in stressful situations to help you see what it is that you do. If we're doing a body scan and you don't like the body scan, and you start internalizing thoughts of, I don't like this, I don't want to do this, you're starting to see your own patterns of stress reactivity. I have an aversion to this, or I don't want to do it, so I'm going to avoid it. This sitting meditation is too long. I hate it. Pay attention to that. You're asked to observe that in a non-judgmental way, to see what it is that you do, how you react to stress. I tell a story. I was shopping. So for me, shopping is a stressor. I do not enjoy it. I never have. I don't think I ever will. Not that I don't like to buy new things sometimes, but it is a stressful endeavor for me to do. So one time I was at a store and I had a limited amount of time. Time is also a stressor, an external stressor, perhaps a chronic stressor. In this moment, it was acute. I had a finite amount of time. I needed to get some items. There was a woman checking out. She had just scanned all of her items. And so I thought, I'm pretty smart. I'm pretty situationally aware. I'm going to get in that line behind her. No one's behind her because she had so much stuff. So I'm the smart guy. I get behind her. And as I think she's paying and leaving, she pulls out an encyclopedia of coupons. Now, I don't know how many coupons, but there's a lot. In that moment, she started to scan some coupons. And I started to pause and I hesitated. She had a whole stack. This was not a small stack of coupons. This was a large book of coupons. And then it became clear that she was going to scan each one. Even if they didn't work or they were expired, she was going to fight to have them included on. My blood quite quickly started to boil. I'm sure my face turned a bright shade of red, and I became really upset, really agitated, and really worried. Part of it was anxiety that I was now going to be late because of this situation. In one moment, I was proud of myself for being smart and aware that I could manage this. And in the next moment, I'm kicking myself. Right? Why? How could you do this? Why didn't you know that she had a coupon book that big? How could you know she had a coupon book that big? It is the largest coupon book I've ever seen. I didn't know they existed like that. In that moment, I recalled a passage from Ram Dass, in which Ram Dass said that every moment is an opportunity to be fully conscious and fully loving and patient. And in any moment, you can make a choice to practice. And so in that moment, I decided to practice patience. And I had to. If I did not, something bad would have happened. The level of anger that entered into me because of the stressor of the coupon book was unbelievable. It was intense. So that was the immediate reaction. So the stress is the coupon book, anger, right? My activation was anger, so that became fight. It was a fight. So for me, that's a pretty typical reaction, right? Because I'm the angry therapist or one of them. And I now had to deal with that. So anger was the reaction that came about that. And then there was the thoughts that I had about that situation. You know, this woman is this woman is that. I didn't know this woman. Never saw her before. I'll never probably see her again or remember her. But that doesn't change the fact that I had some pretty nasty thoughts about someone that I didn't even know. She could have been a saint. I have no idea. She was just doing her own shopping. In reality, she was just doing what she was supposed to do. I thought it was terrible and awful, and I was angry about it. So my emotions were anger, and there was some anxiety in that because I thought I was going to be late. I told myself a story about this woman on how, you know, she was attacking me, right? Like it was personal, even though it really wasn't. You know, it took the story or that moment by Ram Dass to talk about love and patience to help snap me out of it. But if I hadn't done that, all these stress hormones are dumping out in my body. Just getting the shot of cortisol, right? Tension in my chest. So the emotion is anger, turning red, my blood is boiling. I want to beat somebody up, even though there's no one to beat up. So I want to go to jail. And there's just this lingering tension. And that just doesn't disappear, right? That negative energy that was spent or pent up or built up by myself and my own reaction was intense. And the way that stress works when these damaging hormones get released into the body, they do real damage, right? Not only physiologically, but also psychologically. I mentioned in the introduction that stress kills. It is a silent killer. Stress left unchecked will kill you. It will break your body down, mentally and physically. This is no joke. There are lots of examples of people that have worked very hard, right? In our society, we teach people to work very hard to make it, to be successful. And then in middle age, they have a heart attack, or something breaks down, or they have some other stress-related illness. They become disabled from it. Sometimes that happens and people start to take notice and change their lives. One movie director recently, Kevin Smith, I believe had a massive heart attack and by the grace of God did not pass, but he changed his lifestyle. He changed the way that he was living, and he is now healthy and well as he can be. So you are always able to change. You're always able to, but you have to pay attention. You have to understand what stress does, how it impacts you, and how you can work with it. So when we talk about the stress hormones, seeping into your body, you hear more and more of stress-related illnesses, cancer, high blood pressure, high cholesterol, fibromyalgia, just chronic pain, inflammation. It does serious damage. So paying attention to the stressors in your life is very important. Learning how you react to them, how you relate to stress. Because if you can examine that, right, if you put how you react to your stress under a microscope, then you can start to see it differently. Each time that you have a stressor, and there is good stress and bad stress, right? Like having a baby was a great joy. It was also a lot of stress, right? Not very good sleep, so you're sleep deprived, so you're not really getting restored every night anyway. And it adds some stress, good stress, but stress. So as your baseline of stress, as these things happen, even a small stressor causes fight or flight, right? So think about this, stress hormone dump into the body with each stressor. So even if it's minor, a little bump, so your stress level goes up, continues to go up throughout the day. Now, if you haven't taken care of that, and you just fall asleep or do something, you'll reset slightly, but it doesn't go down to a homeostasis. It just goes down a little bit. And so each day, if you're not taking care of yourself or you're not paying attention to how you're managing stress, it continues to rise. So it goes up, goes down slightly, up again, and it continues and it continues. Until your body starts to break down. I've seen it too many times. Good people, good hardworking people. I don't understand what's happening to me, they say. I don't understand. I've never had this problem. I've always been able to focus and now I can't focus. I've never had a problem waking up for work and now I don't have the energy to get out of bed. Right? So this depression, this exhaustion sets in. Mindfulness simply allows you to see your reactivity patterns and how you relate to stress. When you're dealing with stress, how do you cope with it? There are adaptive ways of coping, which are positive, and then there are maladaptive ways. A younger neighbor of mine recently passed from an opiate overdose. So there are addictions, so drug addictions, and there's many different types of addictions, but that's considered maladaptive, right? Because it's harmful. It's risky behavior. It's harmful to your body. How do you cope with stress? Identifying those types of patterns. So drugs, alcohol, food, the gym, which is not a bad thing unless you do it too much, right? Some people work out too much to the point that they break down again. If anyone can appreciate, there's I would say a role model, a hero to many, former Navy SEAL David Goggins, who kept getting stress fractures in his limbs. You know, he was one of the toughest men on the planet, and yet he was constantly physically breaking down because he was not taking care of the stress in his life. The emotional trauma and stress that had been locked into his body was in there, and he hadn't dealt with it. And so he would physically break down. Mental toughness, mental fortitude beyond belief. But his life improved when he started to pay attention to stress, right? Started working on overcoming his past and some of the emotional trauma that he had been through. And that will come out. As you start paying attention to your body, stress is locked into the body. Stress is held in the body. When you start paying attention to your body, you will start to notice your stress. If you're a first responder or you've gone through some trauma, that will start to come out. And you do have to be careful with that. And so it is important that if that happens to you, or you're starting to feel some discomfort, or there is some past trauma that has been unlocked, finding competent professional help to get that looked at. Because the idea is to release the emotion associated with the trauma in a healthy way so that you can be well. So learning how to identify stressors, the stressors in your life, noticing what patterns that you have as you deal with them, as they show up. I mentioned fight, flight, or freeze. Some people are just in their head. It's just internal. They shut down. They look like nothing's happening, right? They freeze. But there's this world, of emotional turmoil cycling through their minds. So there's rumination, right? This constant spiraling. That leads to an increase in stress. So that one stressor has now become another one, right? Or some type of obsessive type behavior follows it. We're always trying to control our stress. And avoidance. If we run away from our problems, they tend not to get solved. As you learn through some of the encounters that we've done, maybe you shied away from dealing with the unpleasant event or a difficult communication. Is that what you do? I know I've done it. I have preferred not to have a conversation with somebody because I was afraid of how it might go. So I didn't have it. But not having the conversation meant that stressor was not resolved, right? So it just kind of lingered. So sometimes small things, you sweep them under the carpet and eventually they become a dragon. So learning the ways, and you may deal with them differently for different situations, but learning the ways that you react to stress, identifying your stressors, the catastrophes that you imagine in your own life, and learning how to work with them. and you can work with them. There's hope. This program was designed for people in chronic pain. There is hope. You can learn how to work with severe and chronic pain. And you can learn how to work and be with other stressors in your life. It's possible. So we'll give you space to work on your own reflections. And thank you for listening. That ends stress reactivity.